So there we are. Are we started?
Yeah.
Pretty much, huh? Well, let me tell you. I've been asked for stories, and berry camp stories in particular, but I like all things in their time. We could sing those songs and have those stories of berry camp about butterflies and berries, bears, deer, all that stuff. But this is Halloween time, and all the food is off, and now it's kind of like getting cold outside. And spooky stories of the season. So there's one I want to tell you about, a ghost story. And I can tell you these stories because we're evolving from a work of fiction. And in this work of fiction, there's certain things mentioned, you know. And so we're going to work with that piece of fiction and kind of fill it in some background for a thought called Moves, and another one called Mountain Meadow. Because it was in that way that they understood that all before there was a physical world, there was a spiritual one, and all physical laws were preceded by spiritual laws, and all things happening in the world today were things that already happened in the spiritual world. Before there was the swallowing monster in your world to kill and coyote to do it, there was all that before in spirit time, and all those things were known. And that's how it is, you know. So with the move of things, the spirit that moves all things, the spirit that is the air that flows and gives life to all things. It is water, it is fire, it is ice, it is springs up out of the mountain, it is the air you breathe, it is the Father, it is the moves that gives things life. It is move. Now there's all kinds of things that you could do. You could act on the very intention of moves, like working with your Father in His field, actually finding the intention of the Spirit Creator right there, making all things lovely and lively. And then you can watch magic flow through in your life because you've lined up that way. And that we consider moves that way. And that's one of the ways you might consider it. And in that work of fiction, The Man Who Fell in Love with the Moon, that particular story, it has another version of it. So you see, there's all kinds of ways to consider a thing. It moves in lots of directions, moves. Just as this definition might be moving in different direction, because there's something you can do maybe even that might move a spirit, and that's moves too, because you might be in a situation much like I was down in Spencer's one day with a Tipi, this Tipi here, Dirty Skirts, and we were down there at the Spencer's Hot Springs, and I had a bunch of trash from all kinds of people there that I had picked up, and then I was left with the problem of disposing it. And it's for this reason that I don't continue to clean up after people. I don't want to be their mitigator. I don't want to be, what do they call it, the enabler, cleaning up after their messes, make them look good where they're not looking good. So I quit doing this. But at that time, I would pick up that trash, and I had a bunch of it, and I was smoldering it. And I had these big old stumps of pinyon pine that were not splittable, but they were pretty much dry. And they were in there. And what I did was I got a kind of a bed of coals going, much like we got here, and then I stuffed all that wet trash, big old bunches of it, heavy wet trash, right on top of those coals, because I intended to really get rid of it. And then I put one of those great big old unsplit pieces of wood, big old piece of wood on top, and I walked away. And that thing went, and that fire sat there for hours, smoldering and whimpering through that wet trash. It just sat there for hours on those coals, smoldering, whimpering, steaming, drying, trying to push its way through. You know, it did that. And I was watching, and it started to glow, and it started to have a nice big hole, and it was like the little train that could. You could feel it. I know I'm going to go. I know I'm going to burn. I know I'm going to burn. And you could feel it building and building and building, and before it really ever came to flames, while it was still this bright, glowing ember, finally burning its way through all that trash and crap, I stuffed another big old wad of trash right in that hole, and I took another big old piece of that wood, and I stomped it down. And you could hear it deflating. The little fire. And it kept going again. And it smoldered away for hours. I think all day long now. And it was doing this all day long, and it starts to build a coal. And it starts to act like it's going to come back, and you can hear its little song. It's going to burn, and it's smoking, and it's getting lively over there, and after hours, you know, finally it's coming on, and I'm gonna make it this time. I'm gonna make it this time. And I stood up and I looked across the flats that was below us and below the fire. And the fire was behind me. And I was standing between the fire and the salt flats down below, the alkali flats below Spencer's Hot Springs, and I looked out across. And I thought, well, I should go get another one of those big old stumps and stuff it in that hole. And so I did. Boom. And it went through that process. Oh, it went down again. And it did it some more. And as it did it some more, it was louder and louder. It had less trash and more wood there going, you know, but it was trying, and I was thinking about another sack of trash. Hours later, looking across the flats, when I seen it stand up there. It was a twisting wind, and it looked like it was mean, and it looked like it had some intention. And in fact, from the very moment I saw it, I knew its intention was mean. And it stood up. And it got taller and taller and taller as it came across the alkali flats below Spencer's Dam. That spring dam. Hey! Hey! See the spirit of a thing? It's Halloween. This is real. You see that dog's going? The spirit of a thing is in that. Listen. I watched it spin higher and higher, twisting meaner and meaner, throwing more and more dust around, and it come charging across that alkali brush. It come charging straight up the dirt road, throwing dirt and gravel everywhere. It came right up behind me, and it stopped right on top of that fire and started spinning. And as it spun, I understood an intention, because it stopped and started spinning. And as it spun, it sucked that flame right up out of that fire, right up into the tallest reaches of that thing, and it lit up and had eyes and looked at me like, you bastard, and spun off of that fire, kicked the front of my teepee, throwing the door open, and it went up the mountain to where there was another spring up there. It went up the hill further, and it disappeared into the sagebrush, just like it came. That is another picture of Moves Moves. But Moves Moves has a companion. They call it Mountain, Not a Mountain. When you have unbelievable accounts of places like over in the Wallawas, places over in the Eagle Caps, places in those kinds of places where there's mountains made of mountains that are only from in all the world. Indonesia. And all around this mountain there of Indonesia are all these other rocks that are not the same thing. And standing around it, pushing up through it like giant pinnacles, are basement rocks of Mother Earth and granite ripping through it. But there it lays all across the whole landscape there, this mountain that is from another place. And it's right here at this place above Hell's Canyon and Joseph and Halfway and the Eagle Cap. And it's this place of the Nimapu where they first understood how mountain was not a mountain, but that was a perception thing. Somebody might think a mountain of a pile of rocks with minerals, but they think of the sky like it was air, and they could tell you how much nitrogen, how much oxygen, they could tell you how much moisture and barometric pressure, but they don't understand that it's a living thing with its own intention, its own thought that gives all things life, and it flows through all of them, even every blade of grass and every tree leaf and every ant that crawled and gave life to all things. They don't understand its intelligence. And much the same way, Mountain Not a Mountain is that way, because the people don't think of it like it is, with its own intention, a living thing with its own purpose. They think of it as a pile of rocks, dirt, maybe, you know, there might even be some minerals and trees or whatever, and they think of it that way. They don't understand it, how it might have its own intelligence, how that mountain not a mountain, maybe even there by Halfway, Oregon, is a Halloween story. Because they're told stories in the dream lodges how forever and ever some Nimapu thought that mountain was just a mountain, and they'd go by a spring and it would talk to him and they wouldn't hear talking, only a spring gurgling. Some Indian long ago thought that maybe mountain was not a mountain, believed it was so, and walked around such things as those springs not hearing the talking. They would hear the wind in the trees and not understand the language of the thing, think they were just listening to the music of wing in the trees. They might even hear a song of morning and thought they heard poetry. They were so disconnected, this one. And it was walking out of a dream lodge in such a way as to be blessed, and one day while walking through these very mountains up here, Mountain Not a Mountain, decided to open up an eye, and then another eye, and speak to that one. And talked about how, as Mountain Not a Mountain, would lift up and fly. And it could move itself wherever it chose to. And has this capacity. But it had lived so long and had been in the world so long and moved around as it does so much that this is how it lays about. But this is mountain, not a mountain. It spoke to that one. And though you think it's a mountain in your perception, it is just dirt and rocks. It's in fact a living thing with its own intention and purpose. And it could actually stand up and walk. And stand up and fly. And some of these mountains swim. And there's stories about the swimming mountains. About that thing that go back 40,000 years. But it's Halloween, so I thought I should tell you a couple of scary stories. And that's them. Thanks.
Yay!
Yeah.